This is Actualize Freedom, straight talk on growing clicks and conversions on Amazon FBA from people doing it every day. Now here's your host, digital marketing acrobat, Danny Kenji Carlson.
What's up, my Freedom Actualizers? So I have put together something really valuable for you. I just sent an email to all 65 plus of the past Actualize Freedom podcast guests, just asking if they could put together a special deal just for you guys with their softwares, with their courses, whatever they're offering. There's a lot of people out there who have really valuable Amazon software that we talked about. There's some courses out there that some of these courses have been made just for you guys or are 50 to 70% off. Some of them are completely free. So this is all of the best exclusive offers only for the Actualize Freedom podcast from the podcast guests themselves, from the masters themselves. So to get this, guys, just go to actualizefreedom.com. You'll see right there on the homepage where you can go and get that list. So this is exclusive offers just for the Actualize Freedom podcast listeners like yourselves from the guests themselves. So go check that out, actualizefreedom.com. What's up, guys? Danny Carlson here with the Actualize Freedom podcast, and we have here Zack Leonard from Gembah. And this is going to be a very insightful episode, I think, on real business fundamentals, things that people do not like to talk about, but the smart people are always talking about. So let's just cut right to the good stuff. What do you mean when you say adding revenue and cutting cost is just the fundamentals of business, like the real core fundamentals? Like, what does that mean for all our listeners here?
Yeah, so when I look at any business that we help, I look at it in two ways, and that's, like you said, adding revenue and cutting costs. And so from a revenue side, when you look at, your 2020 goals, for example, how are you going to be adding revenue to your business? Is it through new product development? Is it through, increased sales? How are you planning opportunities? And from a cutting cost perspective, again, you're looking at it from a fundamental way of, your bottom line, right? Are you going to be renegotiating contracts with suppliers? If you're a product company, are you going to be optimizing your supply chain if you're doing overseas production, or is it are you going to be shutting down some SKUs because they aren't effective or they're not profitable for you? So at the end of the day, when I think of fundamentals, it's revenues and costs, and ultimately increasing the value of your business, so you're increasing your bottom line.
Excellent. And what do you think are like the first 2 or 3 things that every Amazon business could look at to cut their costs? Maybe they're already doing well with a line of products, but what are the first things that you would look at to improve that?
Yeah, the most obvious one to me is looking at your supply chain and how you can optimize it. So the first thing we look at Gembah, which is the company I founded, is are you getting the best potential cost for each component of your product that you're trying to sell? And so an easy way, a quick hack for anyone out there that's listening that wants to go about cutting some costs is first get your price quote from your factory as a true bill of material cost. So understanding what each component that goes into your final product costs the factory to make. And if you can look at that bill of materials and understand the cost, then you can start getting competitive bids from other factories for those components. Meaning that if you have, let's say you have a $5.99, $5.99 product that is a cup, and the cup comes, what is the case cost? What is the lid cost? What is the packaging cost? And you can start understanding truly where the opportunity is for you to optimize on your existing product. So that would be the number one way that I think I can recommend to start the conversation with your factory about cutting costs. Because everyone, that we speak with, at least from my perspective, they're always wondering how they can cut costs, but they don't have the understanding of, where to start or where to begin in that conversation. And it's not just a conversation of, I want to cut my costs. You have to have an educated understanding of what your costs are, and then you can optimize based on what those costs physically are.
Yeah, I really like that approach. And so how do we go about this? Obviously, it's not something that you're just going to ask your supplier and get them to hand over exactly how much it costs them to do everything, right? So how do you go about just getting these kind of costs and then piecing it together? Is there a good resource for that of where you can find this kind of information?
Yeah, so Actually, what I recommend first is building the relationship with your factory. So a lot of Amazon sellers maybe found their supplier on Alibaba. They haven't visited China. They aren't regularly in touch with their factory, and you'd be surprised at how much they are willing to yield if you build that relationship. So visiting your factory, showing up, face to face. The culture over there is called guanxi. It's the Chinese way of doing business over there, and they value more than just the transaction. They value the relationship. And so when you start to build a relationship, when you show up, you're going to start to understand how they do their business. And so from their perspective, what's the most important thing? It's that you're paying on time, because again, they're fronting all of the labor and all the material costs before it hits your warehouse. So when you say you have those 30-70 terms, or you have those 25-50 terms, you're putting down a deposit, and they're doing all of their work up front for you before it physically hits your warehouse. Maybe if you're into retail as well, you might have a net 60-day in return policy that they also have to front as well. So for them, they're doing a lot and going out of their way to make sure that they can make your product and fronting all those costs. So if you show up and really show them that you're in this for the long haul and are a true partner with theirs, that's when you can start getting all that information about, hey, here's exactly what it goes into it. Here's, I've seen labor costs on price quotes. Like, they're willing to get that transparent if you ask those questions and you start building the relationship.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so what is a reasonable kind of profit margin to give to your suppliers, right? Let's say that you got all of this information and you know exactly what it costs them. What kind of profit margin are they starting at, and then where do you want to eventually get them down to, so that, obviously they still need to make money too, but you want to get the best deal?
Yeah, I think it depends on what your goals are. Your goals to squeeze and have a short-term relationship with your factory, or is it to build a long-term, long-standing relationship and have them scale as you scale up? So if you're looking to sell your business in the next 2 to 4 years or 2 to 3 years, and you need to have that conversation of, I need to get my costs down right now so I can maximize my value for my exit, then you might be looking at, that short term, like I don't have the sense of necessarily caring that my factory is going to get squeezed for the margins. It's not a long-term play. Obviously, that's a short-term play. If you're looking for a more long-term, I want to grow my business. I don't want to sell it. I just want to increase my bottom line and create more wealth in my pockets that way. Then you're talking about building a more long-term sustainable relationship where, those margins are more important because you want your factory to actually still be around in, 3 to 6 years, right? So those are two very different conversations that you should be having, with your internal team to see what your goals are over the next 1, 2, 3 years. And then when you go into that mindset, again, single-digit margins for anyone is not sustainable. So you want to at least give them the double-digit margins. But again, if you're looking to squeeze and get the most out of your value right now and then have an exit, that's how we kind of think of it. That's the mindset we put ourselves in.
Yeah, that certainly makes a lot of sense. And I guess this kind of ties into product innovation. If you're creating this kind of relationship with your suppliers, does that give you some better avenues for product innovation and just like really working on creating products that are improved and better?
Absolutely. So if you start building the relationship with your factory, both from a financial as well as a physical presence there, and they start to see that you're, doing a sizable amount of their revenue, they're obviously going to want to come to you and show you the latest and greatest technology that they're creating and give you the first and maybe exclusive right to sell all their new stuff, right? And so at the end of the day, this all is part of the fruits of building that relationship. So, that's one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is to really start to do it from your own perspective and do some research on your own, and then kind of go into the product innovation process with an industrial designer or an engineer, and that's a totally separate conversation.
Yeah, and so that can get a little bit messy, right? Let's say that you went and you got some 3D graphic designer, 3D CAD model of a brand new product, and then you're taking it to these factories, and none of the factories can actually produce this without some crazy expensive equipment or mold or something like that. How do you navigate the process of creating product innovation that also can be produced at a reasonable cost with manufacturers? Do you have a specific kind of way of going about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at Gembah, we do this regularly with 7, 8, 9-figure sellers, as well as a bunch of different e-commerce brands that we work with. And so we take kind of a 3-step process into it. The first step is coming up with the idea, doing the research, and really building the understanding if you have an actual viable market opportunity here. And so there are tools out there like Helium 10 and Gembah Scout where you can start to look at the search term data. But then what do you do from there? You need to physically go out and find the opportunity. So you need to actually physically design the product. And so you're going to want to find a good designer and engineer that have actually made products in mass production before. I've seen designs that are, way out there from a craziness perspective. They might look cool, but they're not going to actually physically be able to be made in mass production because no factory is going to want to deal with, hundreds of components going into a single product. That's a ton of molds. That's a ton of tooling. That's a ton of fees and labor that the factory is going to have to actually inquire for you or for you to actually make that product. So the step actually doesn't start with the factory. It starts with having a good engineer and a good designer to make a product that doesn't have so many components that it's not going to cost you a ton of money to pay for these molds, to pay for the tooling, to pay for the labor to assemble your product.
That makes a lot of sense. So finding someone ideally who has some experience creating products that have been taken to market and they understand what it takes to create a product that won't be just so ridiculously expensive to set up all the molds and everything like that.
That's absolutely right.
Is there a specific specialty, like a specific word for someone like that? Like, would that be like a product engineer, or like how would someone go about finding one of these people?
Yeah, so again, we handle this. We have a team of engineers and designers that do this, but the first step is to find an industrial designer. That is someone who can really take concepts and bring them to reality through sketching, through 3D printing, through prototyping, all that kind of stuff. And then you need to start getting that verified by an engineer. So if you have, multiple components going into a product, you need to find the right engineer. So it might be a mechanical engineer, it might be an electrical engineer if you have electronic components to what's going into it. So again, that's really the way it works. And if you think about it in, let's say the analogy I always like to use is if you're building a house, right? You need to have an architect and a builder to build the house. And as you as the customer, it's the same thought for a manufacturer. You need to have the blueprint, which is your CAD drawings, your renderings, your samples, all that stuff to go to the factory for them to physically build the product. And a lot of Amazon sellers or a lot of people try and circumvent that process. And that'd be like building a house without an architect. And so if you build a house without an architect, what is the builder going to actually make? You have no idea. They're going to control the end process. And they're going to make it as cheap as they can because at the end of the day, they're a business too. They're a building business. It's the same concept with the manufacturer. If you go to the manufacturer and you don't have a bill of materials, you don't have those CAD drawings to actually show them physically how to make the product, they're going to take, the liberty of owning that process for you, make it cheap and not make it to the high quality that you're expecting it to be. So that's like the fundamentals of how to make a product. And that's the things you should be looking out for, the people you should be working with in order for you to successfully launch a new and awesome product out there.
And what are the typical costs for working with an industrial designer, like all the way through the process of creating, from concept all the way to the point where you have something that you can reasonably hand over to your supplier and be like, okay, here it is, let's make it. Like, what are the typical costs and the time frame for something like this?
Yeah, it really depends on the intricacy of the design. But like for my company, for example, we can do this within 1 month and we can do it for as little as $2,000. Again, that is the design phase, which what you're going to get out of that is, sketches to hone in on the final product. Then you're going to have a 3D rendering, and then finally the bill of materials to do that. And then you can get even, you can go more of the prototyping route where you do 3D printing. You can do, CNC type prototypes. You can do a small batch manufacturer here in the US and get a prototype made. Again, it's all about, the capital that you want to spend on this, the opportunity that you think is viable, and how much research and testing you've done to verify that this is truly an opportunity where you can succeed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot more accessible than I thought, right? 1 month and $2,000 for a product that potentially can position you on Amazon to be the only person with that new improved product, right?
Yep.
Can you give us an example of what a $2,000 new product would look like versus like a $50,000 one, for example?
Sure. So if you think about a cup, for example, so like the cup from an injection mold standpoint, like those designs are already out there. So understanding that if you're injection molded in glass, it's not as expensive, or plastic is a little bit more expensive than glass typically in the injection molded process. So if you understand how each different material costs, in mass production, and what the molds cost to make those in mass production, again, that's something. But if you're looking at, like, let's say you have a cup that has some sort of measuring device that's electronic to understand how much water you're drinking every day, that's obviously going to be more expensive because you have to then incorporate some sort of electronic mechanism to measure what's going on in the cup. So you're going to have some sort of component that measures that, whether it's Bluetooth enabled or something like that, that maybe it goes into your app, and you have to have some software. So again, it really just depends on the intricacy of what you're trying to do. But that's kind of a direct understanding and a differentiation between like a $2,000 design versus like a $20,000, $30,000 design.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you're also really into the sourcing world here. So what kind of advice can you give us if we not necessarily looking for a manufacturer for something like super unique, but just in general, like we're looking to find manufacturers for our products? What are some just general golden nuggets that we should be watching out for when choosing our suppliers or finding the right suppliers?
Yeah, so there are a few things that, I would recommend to anyone listening. The first thing is verify as much as you can. So when you're looking to first start a relationship with a factory, you need to understand what they currently are making, what companies they're already working with, and what audits they've had on their factories. So you need to ask for SGS, Intertek, Bureau Veritas, or some sort of audit that they've had in the last year, because every year they need to be having an audit if they're a top quality factory. From there, then you go and ask them, okay, can you send me example products you made, so they can take pictures, photos, videos, whatever it is of similar products that they made for you. Then you need to ask what kind of machines they're using, right? So you need to have them take photos and maybe some videos of machines that you're using. All this you can do from afar. And then on top of that, you may want to check some import records to see if they've imported goods before into whatever country you're selling it into. There's tools out there like Panjiva and Import Genius where you can do that. Also, import records are freely available. They're public record in the United States. So if you want to, do the due diligence and sink your teeth into that data, go right ahead. But that's another way you can verify it. And then also, again, once you see everything that's on paper how it is, I also strongly recommend having someone, yourself or someone who you trust, go to the factory for you and verify that everything that they're saying on paper is truly what the reality is. Again, you're going to be able to find a lot of information that you wouldn't be able to find showing up at your factory. One huge thing about that is being able to see how much scale they have. So I have a customer that we've been working with that his product has been growing on Amazon like crazy, and he kept on asking his factory to produce more and more, and their lead times just kept going up and up and up. And so he went to visit the factory, and he realized that this factory doesn't do any of the production actually in their factory. All they do is screen print the final touches on this factory. So that factory is ordering all the components and just basically having it assembled at another factory and then just doing the finishing touches on their factory. You wouldn't be able to have that information or understand that if you didn't show up at the factory himself. So what he understands now is he needs to find a factory that actually does all of the manufacturing or most of the manufacturing in their factory alone because of the scale that he's at. So you're going to get a huge understanding of what scale your factory can actually produce by showing up at the factory as well. So it's kind of that trust but verified notion and that mindset. But that's exactly what it takes to have a real trustworthy partner overseas for manufacturing.
Yeah, because that would be like a trading company basically that you're talking about essentially, right? There's like getting a product from another company and then just adding something onto it to have the finished product and then significantly marking it up probably, which is a legitimate business model, but not the best if we're talking about cost cutting, right? Is there any indicators that you recommend people do to verify that they are the real factory, like without actually going over all the way to China? Like what are some red flags or indicators that you might be working with one of these companies?
Yeah, if you're starting to look at long lead times, if you're looking at round numbers on your price quotes, they won't give you bill of material costs, if any of their price quote says trading on it or something like that, those are pretty good indicators that you're not working with a factory. They're working with some sort of middleman. You should, and again, if they have really low MOQs as well, typically the more established factories don't have extremely low MOQs. That's another way that that you're probably working with a trading company, which again, for your business, if you're trying to test out a product, it's a great way to start. You're working with a trading company because they're going to offer you much more flexibility on the MOQ side of things. but know that you're going to quickly scale beyond them because they're not the actual factory themselves.
Yeah, just adding more complexity, another markup in the process. And maybe let's hop back over to product innovation there. So we talked about like how to actually go through the process of creating an innovative product, but what about informing what kind of innovations you should make? Well, what would you recommend are some good strategies for people to verify that whatever innovation they're coming up with is actually a good market fit, and where to get these ideas in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. So an example that I have is there's tools like Helium 10 and Jungle Scout where you can start looking at the search term data. Once you find that opportunity, so you can go on places like Etsy and Pinterest to see what the trends are. So an example of this, if you look on Helium 10 right now, there's a product, there's a huge opportunity in the cake stand market. I see that there's a lot of search term data that says like this, there's a lot of people searching for it for whatever reason. Maybe there's a ton of holiday parties, or maybe there's a ton of weddings going on. I don't know, whatever it is. Go to Etsy and Pinterest and type in cake stands and see what comes up. A lot of things are wood. On wood. Go back to Amazon and search wooden cake stands. There's barely any cake stands being sold that are made of wood. So Etsy's saying that the trends are going that way. Pinterest is verifying that the trends are going that way. Go back to Amazon and check and see if there's wooden cake stands. You find nothing. So there's an opportunity where the trends on the smaller, custom made products are in wood. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to then design something that's made from wood as opposed to glass or ceramic.
I love that. So is there a special page on Etsy or Pinterest where you can just see like trending items, or can you walk people a little bit through that process more, like someone like me? I'm not a Pinterest expert. I don't shop on Etsy. Like how do we navigate those platforms to find the trending stuff or to do that kind of research?
Yeah, you have to just like it's as easy as typing into the search bar. You need to just, again, if you use Helium 10 and you can do your due diligence on how to physically look up products, it's as easy as typing into the search bar and just kind of scrolling around looking at the pages, and then when you see something interesting, type it in again on the search tool and say, hey, maybe like if I see a bunch of wooden ones, type in wooden cake stands, and then you go back and say, this looks cool, I like this. See if there's ones that are selling, see what the price points are. Those types of things are what will indicate whether you have an opportunity. And then go back to Amazon. Maybe that price point is in line with what's being sold on Amazon. Then go start looking at manufacturers that are wood manufacturers in China or maybe India. India is a great place to look for wood products. You can go look for suppliers there that could maybe make some lower MOQ stuff. Like India for sure is a place right now that's offering much more flexibility on MOQs because they're much more handcrafted goods. So you could test out a low MOQ good and maybe charge a premium for it and have that, add a ton of revenue and value to your business and add it to your bottom line and create a whole new product offering that you never thought was out there.
Awesome. I love that. And when it comes to business foundations, where else do you think commonly these type of e-commerce businesses are just getting it wrong? Like they just don't have this foundational thing set up that is going to be causing them problems in the future, or is just getting in their way?
Yeah, I think a lot of people chase revenue. They chase a top line number, which is great in theory, but if you're not profitable or you're not making high margins on those revenues, you're handicapping your business. You don't have the flexibility to pay for marketing to add to your bottom line. You don't have the flexibility to create new products. You don't have the flexibility to hire the right people to grow your business, right? You're dealing with single digit margins, and that to me is just astounding. There's so many products out there that have high margins or higher margins than single digits. There's so much flexibility once you get into those types of businesses, and a lot of people again just chase top line revenue, and that's a great vanity number. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to sell your business. You're not going to put more money in your pocket by just adding revenue, and you're going to be adding profitable dollars. Talk to Joe Valley at Quiet Light. Talk to any of the business brokers out there. What are they looking at? They're looking at bottom line net profits in order to value your business. That's just how it works.
Yeah, and especially in the Amazon FBA space, I think people are a little bit obsessed with just posting screenshots of their sales. And not very many people are posting screenshots of the profit and loss statement because it probably doesn't look as good as a top line sales number. And I know even from personal experience, I've kind of like fallen a bit into the ego trap sometimes of being that guy who makes, X amount of monthly sales and has X amount of employees. And that feels good for the ego. That's great. But I've been in situations where, there are some months where my profit and loss statement did not look very good because I let my ego get a little bit carried away. I hired the extra marketing person that I didn't need. I spent a whole bunch of money on, this extra thing that, because I was focused on the wrong thing. I just focused on just bringing in more top line revenue at whatever cost that was going to cost me to bring in more top line revenue. So I totally echo you on that. What are some ways that you'd recommend that Amazon sellers are monitoring the profitability of their business and just really keeping a pulse on that? Because I know for a fact that a lot of listeners that are successful Amazon sellers right now do not have this figured out very well. They don't have good systems to know how profitable they are SKU by SKU or just in general in their business.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, I think the number one thing you can do is outsource and hire someone who can do that for you. I mean, just don't let, like you said, don't let your ego get in the way and hire smart. If this is a huge goal for you in 2020 to increase your bottom line and you don't know how to do it, go hire someone who could be an outsourced CFO or hire someone who can handle your books for you that you don't have to bring on full-time, because it's not a full-time job. It's a monthly or weekly something job. There's certain things that are core to your business that you will need to have on a regular basis, right? You need to have someone who's operating the business, if that's you or if that's your co-founder, or if that's a VP of operations, whatever it is. That's someone who's core to the business. They're going to help you stay informed on those types of things. But if you're talking about again, stuff like bookkeeping, stuff like financial projections, those are things that get refreshed every month or every quarter for businesses of these sizes, and they should be outsourced. They should not, if you don't have a team that's massive, there's no overhead that you're dealing with outside of your inventory. So if that's your number one thing, keep a spreadsheet, have someone manage a spreadsheet that can actually tell you profit and loss statements on each one of those SKUs. And it's not that complicated. It's just math at that point. And again, if that's not a skill set of yours, hire someone who can do it for you. Hire someone, freelancer off Upwork or something that has expertise in that. There's ways that you can at least get a model built out for you that you can get taught on how to use and sustain your business to make it profitable for a long term.
Oh, absolutely. And just to piggyback on that too, just from my own experience, I think really focusing on the team that you're building, be as much contractor based as possible, and really only have the full-time employees in the places where they for sure 100% of the time are going to be working. You can for sure keep them 40 hours a week worth of work every single week. I know I've made that mistake too many times in the past where I had a position that it was close enough to full-time hours, and I'm like, screw it, let's get a full-time person in here. But then there's down periods where they're not being kept busy, and your payroll stays the same during those down periods too. And that's I think where a lot of businesses really they get themselves in trouble and their profitability goes way down, right? So I just want to really recommend to people, try to keep the business as lean as you possibly can with injecting contractors into various roles that will scale up and down with your needs for the business. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. I think as entrepreneurs, the number one asset you have is time. And so where you think you can use your time most effectively is what you should be focused on, right? If you're a great marketer, if you're great at PPC, if you're great at product innovation, focus your time there, and then let someone else who's an expert at the other stuff you're not an expert at do it for you, right? That's the goal of that's a true CEO. That's what a true entrepreneur can do, is they know where their strengths are, they hire for their weaknesses, and they scale their business in an effective manner. So they're hiring for, like you said, contractors. If it's not a full-time role, they're just balancing their budget. I mean, that's what it means.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear for yourself, what do you see as your superpowers, so to speak, and then where are you weak, where you have to bring in team members or contractors to help?
Absolutely. I think financials and operations is definitely my strong suit. Where I'm probably weaker is on the physical engineering and design work. I'm not an engineer by trade. I'm not a designer by trade, and I have a lead designer on my team that handles all of the most design work that we do. And then we have a network of designers that are contractors that, do a bunch of the other designs and engineers of my business. And so, I've hired someone who's awesome, he's utilized full time, and he helps us also vet, engineers in that sense and designers in that sense. So we have an expert vetting experts to be on our platform. And so, that's kind of where I've let him run and let him scale the business, and it's been successful for us.
Yeah, I think that's so important to just like really identify what you're really good at and then get someone who is really good at the stuff that you're not good at. And very interestingly, I have the opposite strengths and superpowers as you do. So like financials and operations is my weakest part, and that's the thing that drains me the most. I really hate doing it. I can, but it drains my energy to do that, and there are people out there who are much better at it than me. So I have an operations manager that really handles that side of things, and that's what they really love to do. And on the flip side, I really love to do stuff like this, like the podcasting, the creating relationships, the building the right team and marketing and all that kind of thing. And so I just try to focus the majority of my time on that.
Awesome. You're doing it right.
Yeah, so for me, it is a huge effect on my ability to run the business if I am focusing on the things that I actually enjoy doing and am actually good at, rather than just doing the financials and just the day-to-day operations of the business and feeling really drained after like 2 to 3 hours of that, and then not having the energy to focus on the rest of it. So to wrap things up here, this has been a really insightful episode, I think. Maybe we're not talking about the sexiest things in people's business, but we're talking about the things that people should be focusing on in their business, the things that you don't want to, but like, eat your spinach, like your mom always told you. Focus on the profitability of the business. If you could give some parting advice to someone who they've figured things out, they got a decent line of products going, and they really don't know where the business is at as far as profitability, and they know they don't have the systems in place to really monitor and track it, what is like the first thing you would tell them to go do?
I would go find someone who can manage your books, because again, if you don't have a pulse on your business as the lead of your business or the operator of your business, it can be a scary thing to continue to do, because you don't know if your next paycheck is going to be your last one, or you don't know if your products are profitable, and you don't know if you have value in your business, right? And so I would go find someone immediately who can get a handle on that for you.
Yeah, definitely sage advice. Well, awesome, Zach. Really appreciate your time on here. And if people want to reach out to you or learn more about what you do, where's the best place for them to do so online?
Yeah, you can check out our website. It's www.gembah.com. That's Gembah. If you have any questions on sourcing or product innovation, we have a really great team that handles all that stuff for you. We make it very simple. We get awesome products launched in as little as 100 days, for as little as $2,000-$3,000 if you're trying to do something completely from scratch. And then we've also, from our perspective, helped a ton of Amazon sellers lower their cost of goods sold just by doing some of the stuff that I talked about. And on average, if they go to production with us, we're saving them between 18 and 20%. So, this is real bottom line value that you're adding to your business if you use a service like ours. And so, I appreciate the time. Would love to hear from anyone in your audience on how we can help. Again, that's Gembah.com, or if you want to email info@Gembah.com, we'll be happy to reach out and have a conversation about how we can help your business.
Awesome, Zach. And if you guys want any of the links or resources mentioned in this episode, you can find them at the show notes at actualizefreedom.com. And if you guys haven't already, go leave a review on iTunes. Really appreciate it. I read every single one, and I cry myself to sleep when I don't get any reviews that day. I literally am about to go to bed, and I pull up my iTunes to see how many reviews I got that day, and if there's none, I just get really depressed. So, appreciate it, guys. You don't want me to be depressed, and go leave that review. And until next time, take care.
For show notes and resources mentioned in this episode, visit kenjiroi.com.